Hey guys, we have exciting news. You know how you always wanted some 2NGB merch? Well, today's your lucky day because we have a new merch store. Yes! So go to 2njb.com/merch and buy one of the amazing coffee mugs we have there. BDS Tears mug, nice Jewish boy mug, and nice Jewish girl mug. It's a great way to support the show and own a mug that undoubtedly will be worth thousands of dollars on eBay when we're dead. So go to 2njb.com/merch and buy a mug. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
In collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. For so many, the Arab-Israeli world is a mystery. Even in Israel, where we live side by side with Arab Israelis, it's a foreign culture to us, non-Arabs. We read about it in the news, we see it depicted in the movies and on television, and we hear it talked about endlessly. But we don't really know what it's like. Probably the only part of their culture some of us know fairly well is Arab food. Shawarma, Knaffeh, Msabaha, the list goes on and on and on, and it's a good list, too. But other parts of Arab-Israeli culture are alien to us. For example, what is it like to study in an Arab academic institution? Well, our guest today might just have some insight. Avi Shalev served in military intelligence and the civil administration in Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip for 24 years. And then he had what some might call a crazy idea. He wanted to obtain a teaching certificate in order to teach Arabic in schools, and he decided to do it in Al-Qasemi College, a Sufi Muslim academic institution in Baqa, al-Gharbiyye, an Arab village along the border with the West Bank. Avi wanted to cross the imaginary lines that divide Jewish and Arab Israelis and try to understand what life is like on the other side. Avi documented his experiences in his new book, Al-Qasemi Journal, or Yoman Al-Qasemi in Hebrew, and he joins us today to share his experience. We are thrilled to have Avi Shalev on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, guys.
So you made it out.
Yes. Amazingly.
That's probably what most people, do a lot of people find it surprising that, or do they react as if it's a dangerous thing to do?
Yes. The initial reactions were amazement. You must be crazy.
Because it's dangerous, or you must be crazy because why would you want to do it?
Because it's such an, unusual thing to do. Never mind being an ex-military guy, lieutenant colonel in the army, retired. It's a very strange thing to do for an Israeli to go and study in an Arab college. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the first student there ever. So, they were also surprised that I was interested. But it turned out an incredible experience. So
They said yes immediately?
Well, it was a process. I kind of applied. I came over. They said there's some tests that you have to undergo to kind of see how your Arabic level is, because it's an Arabic-speaking college. And after I passed the tests, they accepted me, and not before the president of the college invited me for a meeting just to see, who the hell is this guy. But generally speaking, they were very welcoming. So, in fact, they said that they've been operating for 30, 40 years, and they've always hoped to have a Jewish student there. And if you have inquired, but no one has ever actually registered himself. Obviously, there's a language barrier and other issues, So I was the first one who actually registered myself and appeared in class. So yes.
Is there any, going back to my original question, is there any actual reason to feel unsafe, to feel like it's dangerous, or is that just probably an illusion that some Israelis hold?
That's a difficult question. In my experience, I studied there for 2 years. And in my experience, I never encountered an issue. But this is not to say that everything is calm. I mean, there's a lot of crime, and crime is a big issue in Arab towns these days, and everyone's talking about it. So even during my studies, there were reports of crime, and I've never felt it in class or in college, and the town seems to me like a very peaceful town. But there are legitimate fears, and I think Israelis are, and this is one of the reasons I went there, is that they have this image of Arab towns, which is strongly entrenched in this security outlook at the Arab sector. And so a lot of people that I tell them about my experience, they say, I wouldn't even go in, for a lunch or for a meeting. I wouldn't feel safe, but I felt very safe.
It's safe to say that, Israeli Arabs study in the Jewish universities all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University,
Haifa University.
But also, you began your studies in 2018, if I'm
Correct.
not wrong.
Yes, correct.
And I guess there's no really necessarily calm time in Israel, but it's, I guess, relatively calm because it wasn't during an operation. But I think if anybody was considering going to do that in 2021, right, or in 2020, then it would have been a bit different.
Yes, although, there were weekends which were not calm in Israel and on the Gaza border in the West Bank. And there was a week or two I didn't go to school because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how things would develop. During the time President Trump made the announcement about the moving the embassy, and those eventual, subsequently the opening of the embassy, and that was a very bloody day on the Gaza border, with I think about 50 Palestinians killed on the Gaza border. So, things can develop, things can happen.
You never know when it's going to hit.
And there was what they call a general mourning, 3 days of mourning in the Arab towns, a type of a strike. So this is not to say that this was an, completely ordinary situation. But as far as I was concerned, that was the best I could get.
Yeah.
Because I have this dream about studying in an Arab university for many years.
When did that dream start, and why?
Well, I perhaps this to kind of describe this, you have to go a little bit back in history. I served in the military for 24 years, and the last 18 years I was in the civil administration. And there
You need to explain what that is.
Okay. So the civil administration is an army unit which falls under the auspices of the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, and is responsible for the civilian life of Palestinians and Israelis in Area C in the West Bank, and also the coordination, both security and civilian coordination with the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian population. So it has a very significant role in the West Bank, and also significant role in relationships with the population in the Gaza Strip. And I served there in many different missions and fields. And I, under my command, served quite a few American and Canadian Jews who immigrated to Israel and joined the military, who actually studied Middle Eastern studies. They did their undergraduate, some of them did their masters in Islamic or Middle Eastern studies. And part of their study, or part of their program, allowed them to study in Arab universities, in Damascus, in Amman, in Cairo. And I was just amazed with that, because they came to Israel, they joined the army, and obviously they spoke good Arabic, and I was very happy with their service. But just the idea of them studying in an Arabic university just blew my mind. And ever since then, I thought to myself, that would be the most amazing thing I could do after I left the army. Study in Jordan, study in Egypt. Obviously, this is just a dream. I realize
For most people, a nightmare, but
yes, it's just not workable. I'm married, I have kids. I'd be an lieutenant colonel in the army. I couldn't possibly do that. Yeah. But the idea of studying there kind of really excited me. Studying in an Arab environment, in an Arab university, that was just a type of a fantasy, I suppose. Every person has his own fantasies. That was my fantasy. And so when I realized I was going to retire soon, I was looking for something close to that. And I was thinking perhaps I could join, I could study in a Palestinian university in Jerusalem, and eventually I realized, I was looking into Al-Quds University. Al-Quds University has a campus in the Old City, which offers an MA in Jerusalemite studies in Arabic. And it's obviously Jerusalemite studies. It's an MA from the Palestinian Arab Islamic narrative. And that I found, fascinating. But it is situated in the Old City and in the Muslim Quarter. And at the time, there were a lot of issues in East Jerusalem and in the Old City, a lot of stabbings, and I realized that just wasn't going to work out for me. So when I heard about Al-Qasemi, which is an Arab college in Israel, it gives an undergraduate a BA in education and an MA in education. And also
that's the only degree, or can you do other degrees there as well?
Well, it's a degree in education today. They give a BA or an MA in education and also a teacher's diploma. They are trying to extend that to other fields and also get recognition as a university, which would be the first Arab university in Israel. And they are the prominent Arab college in Israel. In other words, there are two more, one in Sachin, which is also a teacher's college, and one in Haifa, also an Arab teacher's college.
No, it's a Sufi stream, right?
Correct. So
this is a completely different sect in Islam.
Well, first of all, it's a religious institution. It grew from basically a religious school for Qadis into an education college, and then giving a BA, and then grew into an MA. So it's developing.
Can you give us a sentence of what does that mean? Are there prayers on a daily basis?
Well, there's a mosque in the college. It's a religious. I think the atmosphere is religious. There are religious studies there.
But aren't the Sufis more peaceful, peace-seeking minority in Islam?
Well, the Sufis are a sect or a stream or a school of thought who are more concentrated in the spiritual So the spiritual school, mystical school of Islam. If I would compare it, it's like the Kabbalistic outlook. And so they are more concerned or focused on the internal journey of a person and less with political Islamic doctrine.
But all Muslims come to this.
No, it's actually Sufi Islam is not a very popular or not a very
No, it means all Muslims come to this
institution.
This institution.
Yes. So not all students are Sufis necessarily.
Because most of Palestinians aren't Sufis. Like,
correct.
It's a very tiny minority.
In fact, in my group of students, it struck me that very few are engaged with Sufi thought or Sufi practice.
Okay.
And for them, it was just another facet or another school that they were introduced to. But none of them were practicing Sufis or were...
So can you describe like the first week at the university? What surprised you? What kind of people did you meet there? How were you accepted?
Wow. Well, I must say I kind of joined. I went to... First of all, let me tell you that it's a week or two before my the academic year began. I realized that we were studying on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, which was a big surprise for me. I did not realize, first of all, that anybody would be studying on a Friday and a Saturday. So this was a special program set up for people doing a diploma, and it was done during the weekend. So
for
most
working people.
Correct. So most students doing their BA and MA were taking their studies from Sunday to Thursday, and we would come on the Friday, Saturday. So this was, first of all, a big shock for me because I wasn't prepared for that, nor did I have any idea that was going to happen. I kind of missed that out completely when I registered. And so the group that was, I was in a group of mostly...
I'm sure your wife was happy. You told us you have 4 kids, so
yes,
being along with them for the entire weekend for 2 years.
This was quite a crisis that I had to get through.
He didn't know about it.
The truth is, it was a real crisis at home. I was, I got a shul during Shabbat, and so I wasn't planning on this.
You aren't religious, though. Right? You're not.
I'm not Orthodox.
Highly
but
observant. Yeah.
I go to synagogue on Shabbat. I have a community, and so this was quite a change of event, or quite a let's say a surprise for me. I wasn't planning on this, but still, I think it was such a, as far as I'm concerned, such an opportunity to cross the lines for the first time and do something different and study with Arabs in Arabic. That my passion was there, and I
It wasn't
decided
gonna hold you back.
Yeah, so I decided I would.
Sacrifice.
I would sacrifice 2 years doing this, and this wasn't easy. I mean, it's tough. So I basically spent 2 days a week studying, another day in school, doing my practice. And I basically joined a group of students that were, some came from the Negev, were Bedouins, and some came from the north of Israel, from what we call the Meshulash, okay, the students who came from the north. All of them, well, most of them, did their schooling, their undergraduate, in Hebron University, and in the northern West Bank.
Men, women?
Mostly women.
Mm-hmm. How come?
Well, education is, is mostly, the
Female
slot dominated by
Mhm.
women. You'll see that in all schools, even Israeli schools. For whatever reasons, pay or status or I don't know what, but education is mainly dominated by women. And so I was, one of the very few men who were in the program. So this was a big challenge because I was joining a group. Some of these students didn't even speak Hebrew well because they went through the education in Arab schools and then they spent their time in West Bank universities doing their undergraduate. And so we met, during the weekends, and so this was a very different experience.
So what hit you first? Surprised you, hit you, and shocked you?
Well, I think the
Because I just have to say, you supposedly know the Arabs.
yes.
Your job for 25 years was knowing the Arabs. There aren't many Israelis who supposedly know the Arabs like you do, right? So in theory,
that's correct. In theory, my job for many years was to try and understand Arabs. And I learned Arabic. I spoke the Palestinian dialect, and but I suppose the difference is that the military has a different perspective on life. It has a different focus, and it looks at different things. Obviously, the military has to supply security. That's its job, and so when you work for a military apparatus, you look for different issues. This was the first time really that I was, first of all, as a civilian, as an equal. I wasn't an officer, I wasn't in charge, and in many ways I was in a great disadvantage because my Arabic wasn't as good as theirs, obviously, and I needed their help with a lot of things. Just getting through the work, doing assignments together, it's a huge challenge for me academically. It was an incredible challenge. I mean, I was used to reading newspapers and all sorts of reports, but reading hundreds of pages of literature and analysis of literature and poetry and essays about sociology and psychology, and this was a dream come true in a sense, but incredibly challenging.
but give us some juice. What were the students saying about you? What were the teachers
They
saying?
certainly thought at some point there must have been a student that thought you were Mossad or Shabak or something undercover. No,
The truth is, I was told that initially I was. It was kind of stressful for both sides, I suppose. They couldn't understand what I was doing there. And they asked me a few times, why are you here? Why aren't you studying Tel Aviv? Why aren't you studying in the Hebrew universities? I mean, what made you look for this program? And for me, it was obvious. For me, studying in Al-Qasemi was, a dream come true. Not only because I'm crazy, because this is, the most, I think, the greatest challenge an Israeli can have. And frankly, I don't understand why so many Israelis, and there are hundreds that go and study Middle Eastern studies and Arabic in Israeli universities in Hebrew, when Al-Qasemi is right there. So, in fact, I asked myself many times, how is it even theoretically possible that I'm the first Israeli who's registered there and gone to study there? Because, if this is what you're interested in, this is the place where you should be.
but they don't have a degree in Middle Eastern studies, right?
They don't. But, Islamic studies, Arabic literature, education, So yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. But for me, it was
Did you
the
find
answer was
yourself?
the answer was obvious. I mean, this was the best place to study Arabic and education.
Was there a conflict or at first in the first?
No. I think initially there was a lot of reservations. They couldn't work out what I was doing there, and but after a while, I think they were incredibly nice and friendly and helpful because, academically it was kind of challenging, a lot of work, and a lot of work was done in groups. I would join groups, and in many ways it was, I felt very welcome there. So it was a great experience, and frankly, if I would have to recommend anybody who's interested in doing something like that, I would say that would be a great place to do it.
So tell us a bit about the book. So what do you document in the book? You document sort of your experiences throughout the whole time. How long was it? A year or 2 years?
Well, the program was a year and a half. I did another semester, so I studied there for 2 years.
And in the book you document.
I did not join. I did not join the college in order to write a book. I mean, that was not the plan. I would come home, Friday night, Saturday night. So the study would be from 8 to about 6 or 7 in the evening. I'd get home at about 8, 9. And I'd have so many stories to tell and so many occurrences and so many things to tell my friends and family, and that would be so interesting for them. After a few weeks, I thought, what? Let me just write that down because this is really interesting. And so I started just documenting my experiences, even, just the process of being acclimatized into an Islamic, an Arab, environment. Just getting used to the, muazzin. And the Ramadan and the festivals, and just getting used to the environment. So this was a process of just writing it down, and I would.
What was the first story or the first occurrence that you think that you recall writing down that you're just like, I have to put this down on paper?
Well, I mean, the first thing that amazed me, for example, is the language in the college. I mean, I was, I came to college on first day, and I was given the curriculum and the timetable, and I saw it was in Hebrew, and I thought, oh no, we've started. They're giving me, everything in Hebrew, so they, they're not treating me equally. They're trying to make it easy for me. This is unacceptable. And then I realized, no, the entire system is in Hebrew. So the computer system is in Hebrew, and everyone's going through this in Hebrew. And it's a challenge for some of the students who don't speak Hebrew. And the language, the dialect, the mix of Hebrew and Arabic together. So, I mean, this has been described by some as Arvarit, Hebrew, Arabic. So, the language of students is mixed Hebrew, Arabic. The language we study in, especially the literature, is classical Arabic. And so there's a really interesting mix there.
Did that become like a currency for you? Like, here, I'll help you read your curriculum if you...
Well, most of the curriculum is in Arabic. In fact, practically everything is in Arabic. But
most of the content,
the content is all in Arabic. Yeah. But
the schedule, the itinerary, or whatever is right?
So the framework, the system, the computer system is in Hebrew, and basically what struck me is quite unbelievable is how much Hebrew is very much part of the language. In other words, it has how many Hebrew words have seeped into the general discourse. So you'd talk in Arabic, but you would fit so many Hebrew words. Itfil mazgan, close the mazgan. So it's quite incredible how much the influence of the Hebrew language has
It's kind of like
on
English
people.
and Hebrew,
Yeah,
right? I mean, we use television, televizia,
but
even more in like Tel Aviv. There's the jargon of using like
Yeah, but that's happening
English
all over the
words.
world, right?
Yeah.
English infiltrated all languages,
correct.
yeah.
but here it's something a bit different, I think.
I think it's more profound in the Arab-Israeli community. In other words, you would find that also in the West Bank. Okay, a lot of Hebrew words are seeping in. Okay,
Besides, that's
But-
the language of the enemy. I'm doing the air quotes, but right, it's different than English and Hebrew. Here, you
Mhm.
adopt the language of your, as they see it, occupier,
correct.
which doesn't make sense. But
But this
life is
is
stronger than, I guess, politics even.
absolutely, and this is a lingua franca, and when you hear that, you see that, you realize how much influence Israel has on Arabs and Arab communities, where this is seeping into language. And in fact, one of the great challenges of the college is to basically try and strengthen the Arabic, so that Arabic teachers stick to the classical Arabic and are well grounded in classical Arabic, because Hebrew is seeping in, especially into the discourse. So this was quite a surprise for me.
Did you find anything surprising in the content of their day-to-day discussions, what they talk about, how different it is than what we talk about maybe on our day-to-day? Or was it the same?
I think I found college life kind of very pragmatic. People there are kind of very dedicated to get their diploma degree. So if I was hoping to be like introduced into a very kind of vivid, interesting, exciting political, let's say, milieu or political discussions, I found very little of that. I don't know why. Perhaps because it's a college and it's a very practical kind of degree. But there's very little political discussion, very little, type of discussions you would hope or expect to listen to, political activism. In fact, people were very pragmatic, very practical. They were very keen on getting their diplomas and getting jobs. And in fact, I remember noticing that even during the height of events, in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, there would be very little influence over the mood and over the discussion. And
I think we didn't.
that kind of surprised me.
We didn't clarify that only Israeli Arabs, correct me if I'm wrong, are
Correct.
coming to study there.
Correct.
So Palestinians, Arabs from the West Bank, they cannot come to study there.
This is an Israeli Arab college in Baqa al-Gharbiyye, so it's basically an Arab-Israeli town. And so yes, the students are all Arab Israelis.
It's not impossible though for a Palestinian to get a passport, like a visa or whatever.
But they don't get it. And
Okay.
in fact, this is something very interesting which I've learned. I've told you most of the students there have studied their undergraduate in the West Bank, so it's cheaper there. Many of these universities are well accepted in Israel, so you can graduate from them and get recognition. They don't require the psychometry exam, and so
SATs.
so in a sense, it's much more convenient. And they also have programs for Arab Israelis to study there over weekends. And so a lot of Arab Israeli
It's accessible.
students would work during the week and would study during the weekend, and that will be for them.
So I imagine that you
practical.
were significantly, not significantly, but older than the average. I mean, especially because many Arab Israelis don't draft to the military. So
Correct.
the average age there was probably 19, 20, 21, and you were
Well, there
40?
Yeah,
Something
45.
like that.
So, yeah, so I would say most of them were in their 20s,
Okay.
all with undergraduate degrees. So they, let's say, would study from 18 to 21, 22, and then they would join the college at the age of 22, 3, 4. So yes, there was a gap.
And so socially, did you manage to kind of get along, make friends? Was there a meaningful relationship that you developed with someone in Al-Qasemi?
Look, I think that's a very sensitive point, because at the end of the day, we're talking about an Islamic Arab society, and I'm a man, they're women. So I kind of was very
I see. Respectful.
respectful and
Or you can find yourself in a ditch.
well,
They will find them.
it's just, I think when you go and study in an environment like that, you have to respect the culture. And it's, in a way, far more conservative culture than ours. And so I had many friends, many interactions, but it's, a different type of scene that you would find.
Were there no men studying other than you studying the?
Very few. So there were a few men in different courses doing completing their diploma. But I was pretty much the only one.
Did you ever tell them what you did?
in the military?
No, I didn't share that information. I thought that would complicate the situation. And
I can see how.
And the truth is, I served for 24 years in the military. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I think it was a great service.
Because to them, you are the actual
Embodiment of the occupation.
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I don't know how to. I'm not sure. I think it's complicated, also on their side. The truth is, it's sensitive. So I didn't feel comfortable enough to share, and
You would end in a ditch. So
I don't think so.
probably.
I don't think
Not
so.
everything ends in a ditch.
Not everything ends so dramatically here, but they didn't ask, and I didn't tell. So we kind of, it's well known that all
Ask
men.
me no questions and I'll tell you
It's a
no
well-known
lies.
military policy.
Yes. Arabs know that Israeli Jews do their military.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that we all go to the military.
But if we can get a bit political, I must wonder that there's this cliche also that, all the chief of staffs and all the people who graduate the IDF after a career, many of them become lefties. And I can't help but wonder if that experience maybe highlighted a regret or remorse in you in your career. Like, is there...
Yeah, I personally don't agree with you. I don't think that is the case.
That's
But
the cliche
yeah,
here in Israel.
I don't think that is the case, in fact. I think the Israeli population has become, over the years, more and more conservative.
The
And
population.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the same goes for the military, as a representation of people go in and out. I think most of the I could see it. I entered the military with with left wing ideas, and they came out with more conservative ideas. I think, like many Israelis, I was very surprised with the outcome of the Oslo Agreement. I didn't imagine it to fail so dismally and to end up with so little results. I wouldn't agree with you. And, a lot of people are very cautious about their outlook about the Middle East. About
But did
the
this
situation.
experience have implemented some doubts you knew about your past?
I think what I've gained from the experience in that respect is a deeper understanding that there are very significant cultural differences between Israelis and Arabs, and this cannot necessarily be bridged by investments or economic solutions or jobs. Arab and Israelis are very different in many ways. They see the world very differently. And I think objectively, when you look at the Arab society in the Arab world, the Arab world is going through a very difficult period. Arab society, also in Israel, is going through a crisis, an identity crisis, and it's not only an economic issue. So, in other words, if I used to think, or many used to think, that investing in roads and buildings and infrastructure would change dramatically the outcome, I think today at least I see things as being more complicated than that, and I could see that in the college as well. In other words, Israelis and Arabs are very different. They have a different outlook on life. And so it's not a question, it's not even a territorial issue or an economic issue. It's we are very different, and we have to find a way to work these things out. And I'm not sure anyone has a good solution as how to work these things out. In other words, how do you deal with the crime wave in the Arab society today in Israel? I mean, it's clearly a problem. And during my study there were a few women that were murdered from the community, and there was even a days of mourning. So there are real issues there. But it's not only a question of the number of policemen that we have on the ground. It's deep cultural issues and a change of perspective and leadership, and how that can be done. How can this situation be turned around? I think it's a big question, and at least from my perspective, what I've gained from my experience is that it's not only a question of investment or infrastructure. It's there are big issues here, and
I thought we were going to solve everything today, but
you should have realized that's not happening 200 episodes ago. So were there any encounters with teachers that struck you, or I guess educational experiences that struck you as kind of peculiar? Maybe content that was being taught that was, I guess maybe because it's a Sufi institution, less so, but were there Islamic was there Islamic ideology that was being kind of passed down with the educational curriculum?
The truth is that the answer is the absolute opposite. In other words, if I was hoping to see, the type of things that you were talking about, I mean, there are elements of that. There were discussions there that I was quite surprised and quite amazed at the positions people held and expressed there.
For example?
Well, the issues of the Nakba and the history. I mean, obviously, these are very, very sensitive issues. And often when you hear positions which are, I guess, are kind of widely held by people that question the legitimacy of Israel, or obviously see the history very differently. But what struck me even more is that it's not debated in a way that I would. In other words, it's not discussed so much. It is as if it is not there. In other words, the campus is not exactly the type of campus that I remember from my studies in South Africa. I did my undergraduate in Wits University. I mean, campus was wild. I mean, I did my
Place for ideas, for thoughts, for
discussions and
Mhm.
debates and radical ideas being thrown out.
No debate club is what you're saying. There's
Well,
no debate.
it was far less. It just didn't have the vibe. My guess is that a lot of these issues are considered so sensitive that they're not discussed. And a lot of these poems and stories and novels that we discussed from were not analyzed from a political perspective. So they were analyzed from all other perspectives, religious perspectives, psychological perspective, educational perspectives. But politics is very absent there. So
you're saying when in fact the poem or the piece of literature
very political
is
in
very
nature.
political.
Very political in nature.
So there was a sort of sense of indoctrination.
Well, it's not indoctrination. It's in a sense trying to avoid sensitive issues, trying to avoid possibly explosive issues. So we would study, the best of Palestinian literature. Ghassan Kanafani, who was a member of the political terrorist group that was killed by Israeli commandos, supposedly, or he was involved in the massacre in Ben Gurion, in Lod Airport. He was a
with
great
the Japanese.
Correct. He was a great poet and a very famous writer. He produced a lot of short stories for kids. So there are many, poems and short stories and literary material that we discussed in class and we learned from many different aspects, but not political. So is that because, it's a sensitive issue? Is that because the college isn't interested in, developing this? Is that because people are not really interested in that? I don't know.
But were they political because the author was political in nature?
Sure.
Or was it political? Were you reading a poem that says, that the line is, and on the Nakba, Israel, murdered our children and took our land or whatever.
No.
And then you were like, oh, look at the meter here in the poem.
We're talking about
Or
poetry and stories that have political, symbolic
context.
content.
Oh, my beloved homeland, one day I shall free you.
Not at all.
No?
It's far more complicated, far more.
Okay.
So, I suppose you can analyze these poems and these stories from many different perspectives, but they're clearly political.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask me, did I find that? No, I was actually amazed. I would come to school, I would come to college and to class hoping that there would be this very fiery discussion about these topics. I mean, these are poems and stories written 20, 30, 40 years ago with a vision, and we can look back now and analyze what happened. And yet there's no appetite for that. So, that is a big question. Is there no appetite because
They're
people
fed up.
But I'm still trying to understand what these can you give us an example of a poem that was the most political that you think was ignored?
Well, there's this, I gave an example of Ghassan Kanafani. There is a story about the little candle or candlelight, which is a story told about a girl whose father died and leaves her with this vision or this offer to take over his position only if she can bring in the light into the castle. And so she has to find a way how to bring in the light into the castle. And eventually she finds out the way to do it is to break through the walls and allow the light into the castle. And this is clearly, a story, a symbolic story written by Kanafani about the idea of the Palestinians going back to their homeland and breaking through the wall and returning. and retaking what is theirs, and so interpreted as a story about leaderships of girls, or girls taking their position in society and being able to lead, and the ability to communicate with the community and draw the community. But this is surprising because anybody who read that 20-30 years ago would know that this is clearly the story or the vision of of the return, and it's not discussed now. As far as I was concerned, I was hoping that would be discussed, because that is the interesting part, and it's also interesting to know how young students see that.
Did you not try and raise it?
Well, that's a really good question, because I thought to myself that if I intervene and
We know what would happen.
well, what will happen is that I will change the discourse.
Yeah.
And I was interested to, in many ways, observe the discourse and not dictate the discourse. And obviously, I'm not a neutral element here. And so, if I would intervene, that would develop in a way that is not necessarily the right or the natural development. So,
could it be that they didn't discuss it because you were there?
it's possible. I wondered if that is a possibility. It's possible. I mean, in a sense, I was a foreign element there, and I was, an Israeli sitting in a class and studying with a group of Palestinians. So it's kind of awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially when you deal with criticism of the system, your own values. It might be a bit awkward. So I was, in that sense, I was trying to be as how should I say, least
Conspicuous.
allowing the discussion. This is not to mean
Should
that
have come in dressed up as an Arabic woman.
Like Ehud Barak in the operation.
niqab.
My name is
in
Fatma.
a niqab. Yes.
I'm from Al-Fahir.
That's a funny thing, because I really tried to blend in, and my Arabic is pretty good, and I would speak to people in Arabic, and they would always address me in Hebrew, and I would think to myself, how
Yeah.
obvious is this? I'm really trying to blend in, and nobody would speak Arabic to me.
Maybe
So I'm
it
kind
would've
of
worked if you would have worn a burqa.
Somehow they can pick you up.
They would have picked up.
Even if
For you
really
guys
try.
who aren't watching, Avi is a fairly large person, so tall, very tall. So you would have stood out probably
Yeah.
wearing a burqa.
Okay, so there's a Kickstarter campaign
Yes.
for the book. So if you want to help Avi in his endeavor to publish this fascinating book, we'll put a link, and you can go and put some money and get your copy eventually. In Hebrew, though. So if you read Hebrew...
Well, maybe if you get enough money, you'll translate it to English.
Well, yeah, the book will come out hopefully 2 months, and I'm hoping it will be successful. I've already sold through the Head Start about 230 or 300 books, so hopefully I'll get to a number that will allow me also to translate it into English, and perhaps try and market it in a more lucrative market or a bigger market. The Israeli book market is really limited.
Maybe in Arabic. That's a pretty big book market.
That's a big question. Yeah.
They'll buy it and then they'll burn it.
You don't care what they use it for, just as long as they pay for it.
It's actually not a big market at all.
'Cause it depends on the dialect.
No. In Israel, there are very, very, very few books that sell Arab literature or books.
No, but in the Arab
I'll let you
world.
guess. How many books do you think? How many bookshops are there that sell
Arabic books
Arabic
in
books.
In
Israel?
Israel?
How many would you
100.
say?
I don't know, 50, 60.
I found 3.
Wow. In the
I
entire
I've-
country.
I found 3. Obviously, there are little stationary, places where they sell a few books, but Stimatsky or these type of
Yeah, the big
bookshops,
chains.
the big change, or shops, very few. One in Jaffa, one in Haifa. It's not a book. It's not a big market at all. In fact, it's a big issue in the Arab world. Reading is a big issue, and it has to do with the
Literacy rates.
literacy
Yeah,
rate,
there's the professional, the
the
literature
classical
Arabic
Arabic versus the spoken Arabic,
Yeah,
which
it's
makes
very
it
hard.
far more difficult to.
Right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So, guys, we'll put links. Do you do lectures and stuff like that? Or?
Well, I will start.
Okay.
I will start soon.
So we'll leave also contact details, and if you want a lecture from Avi about his experience, you can reach out.
Great.
Before we go,
Yes.
we are sponsored by Arutz Sheva.
IsraelNationalNews.com. Guys, check them out. They have an English language website, IsraelNationalNews.com. They have great content, news on Israel. We appear there, so check them out, IsraelNationalNews.com.
Also, the Australian Jewish News, check them out, ajn.timesofisrael.com for the Australian angle on the Jewish world.
Yes. And finally, we do this on our free time. So if you want to help us out, go to 2njb.com/donate. And finally, guys, check out the Head Start of Avi Shalev. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was fascinating.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
Bye, guys.
Bye.